An amazing article has come out of Time magazine about a secret plan to control the results of the 2020 presidential election. Yes, you heard that right. Time magazine wrote an extremely detailed article talking about how a group of high-powered people planned and executed control of the results of the 2020 presidential election leading up to Election Day, on Election Day, and even forecasting the election fight that would follow, planning against it, and going ahead and being victorious in that plan. It details how they did every single step of it. Now, Time magazine is not laying this out as subverting the election, rigging the election, or anything like that. It is pitched as protecting the election because it's Time magazine. Now, you'll have to go ahead and make up your own mind about this article, but it is, if nothing else, absolutely fascinating, and there's a lot to learn about it. I wasn't really sure how to do this video. The article is way too long to go through piece by piece. I've considered setting up doing a multiple sort of sectional analysis of each part of the article and talking about each one in turn. I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it because people tend to watch the first video in a series and not really the rest of them. I may do it in an entire live stream. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter how I end up covering this. This article needs a ton of coverage because it has lessons for really both sides and all participants in an election. And it has real moral questions about what we should be okay with as a democratic or a republic society. Okay? It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about the ideas of a democracy versus a republic. And it's about what is actually allowable. And it's also about countering our own perceptions about how these things should be run. There are real lessons to be learned here from Republicans in their lack of organizational structure and a lack of a unified approach to the 2020 election. And if you take this article at face value, that is what cost Republicans the election. Now, you can, again, make up your own mind about all sorts of other things, various voting systems, irregularities in counting, the post-election fights and how the courts refuse to intervene. You can do all that. But what you need to know and what's laid out in this article is that the entire narrative around all of those events was planned prior to Election Day, organized by extremely powerful people, and delivered in a way that was completely controlled. And that control is what determined the outcome of the 2020 election. I want to read from just a brief excerpt before I pull up the article. This is an actual paragraph from this article. And again, this is Time magazine. Quote, "That's why the participants want the secret history of the 2020 election told, even though it sounds like a paranoid fever dream. A well-funded cabal of powerful people ranging across industries and ideologies working together behind the scenes to influence perceptions, change rules and laws, steer media coverage, and control the flow of information. They were not rigging the election, they were fortifying it. And they believe the public needs to understand the system's fragility in order to ensure that democracy in America endures." That's a full quote from the article. If you didn't catch that, it involves literally changing the way we do elections on the fly in an organized effort to engineer the election in a particular way. Now, again, Time is framing this as a plan to control this to support and uphold democracy. But you have to understand the major player in this, the guy, the architect, as he's called in the article, is the former head of the AFL-CIO. That's the largest union and one of the largest democratic organization machines in the country. This was not organized to protect democracy. This was organized to engineer victory for the left. And the scary part is they went ahead and convinced Republicans, Trump-supporting Republicans, to go along with this plan to undermine their own candidate and to undermine their own party. Not only that, but the United States Chamber of Commerce joined hand in hand with them. If you're wondering why businesses had a unified front against Trump and politicians who supported him, following the Capitol riots, this is why. They had actually planned for these contingencies. It actually planned for these contingencies and organized a response even amongst traditionally right-leaning organizations. And they did this with the implicit threat of rioting in the streets that they demonstrated all throughout 2020. Now, they did not plan the George Floyd death and the riots that followed. What they did was saw an opportunity, co-opted the messaging of those riots, and used them as an implicit threat against businesses who refused to follow the line. If this sounds crazy, it should. If it sounds terrifying, it is. But here's the article, and this will be linked in the description below. This is a long read. And like I said, it deserves a full-on breakdown, piece by piece. And I may be doing that very, very soon. So keep your eyes open for that. Again, if you don't follow this channel, I'm Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota. I'm a lawyer and a legal and political commentator here on YouTube. Again, I can't stress enough the importance of this article. Now, no article should be taken at face value, and there's a lot that this article leaves unsaid about the 2020 election. Again, you'll have to read it. You'll have to understand the bias of Time magazine, of the person writing the article. You'll have to understand that this is engineered to be part of the very messaging campaign that they're talking about. Remember, if you're paranoid that all of it was a controlled messaging operation, that's because it actually was. And they're openly admitting it in this article. So you have to assume that this article is part of that controlled narrative, because it is. That being said, go ahead and read into this article and assimilate it into what you think about the 2020 election and figure out what messaging can be taken from it. And my big takeaway from this article is that the left had organized from bottom to top, side to side. They had a complete and total plan that started well before the 2020 election cycle had fully kicked off. They planned for all of this very early, and they went to everyone. They went to local lawmakers. They went to federal lawmakers. They had dinner with Zuckerberg. They had dinner with Jack Dorsey. Wasn't it a little bit weird how Zuckerberg and Dorsey started editorializing and quote-unquote fact-checking Donald Trump's tweets at the same time? All of this happened at the same time? That's because it all happened at the same time behind the scenes. They lobbied these people directly. They co-opted big tech. They co-opted big business. They co-opted small businesses. They went after everyone, and including the right. Organizations like the Lincoln Project, while not specifically named, are likely involved in some way in this. They went after everybody. The right, on the other hand, did not have an organized, unified approach to the election. And they probably left a lot of voters on the table because of that. The right was reliant on Trump's messaging entirely. And while Trump is an extremely charismatic figure that was very popular on the right, especially going into this election season, he was not able to maintain a unified approach to this in the way that this organization was. And that is the real story. It's not about voting systems. It's not about last-minute vote switches. While those may or may not have occurred, it's irrelevant to the underlying premise of the article. The article's premise is that it didn't matter what occurred. They had controlled the entire flow of information, rules, and messaging from jump through the inauguration, all the way. They regarded the vote itself as the first step in a 5-part plan. And until the right can get organized in this way, we're not going to see a right-wing victory or a right-leaning presidential election for a very long time. We have to understand the machinations we're up against, and we have to understand how to implement those policies in a way that support our priorities. And until we do, we're lost. Again, I really, really suggest that you read this article. It is a long one. I will try and do various breakdowns of each section. And until then, I'd love to know what you think about this. Drop a comment below. We'll talk soon. Peace. Peace.